let's give folks around like a couple of more minutes to join and we can get started. Okay, I guess we can get started. So thank you all for joining this call today. Just a disclaimer, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube shortly. By joining this meeting, you are abiding by the CNCF Code of Conduct. The meeting notes have been posted in the chat, so please add your name and organization to the attendance. And if you are new, which I don't think any of you are, please say hello. So this meeting is going to be mostly a check-in meeting to get updates on the work that is currently going on in the stack. And I had few topics on the agenda to just go through all the updates. If any of you are participating in any of these issues, please chime in on that. So the first one was a Kubeflow security update. I believe, Marco, did you want to follow up on this? Do you have any update on this one?
Yeah, no updates on this one. I remember last week we did have a look at this issue which just came in, and okay. I asked for a self-assessment for the project if there was already any by the team, but since then I haven't had any update from that.
Got it. So just to understand, how was this something that was just came in, or was this by the TOC? Brandon, any visibility into this one?
This one is not something that came in from the TOC.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they'll have to go through the self-assessment, and we'd have to prioritize this based on the new process, I believe, right?
Yeah. So I think I put in an agenda.
Yeah.
Part of the agenda to kind of chat a little bit more about this. But yeah. I think the only one from the TOC that wasn't asked is, let me set manager.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's TOC initiated.
Yeah, I think that's the one that they've kind of been asking feedback on.
Okay.
So I think that will be something that we can prioritize next in the queue.
Right. So because there's one more on Pixie, which I believe Justin is looking into. But again, this is something which is not initiated by the TOC. Okay.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether it may be a good option to maybe do some of the trend modeling stuff. So maybe we can. I think having the self-assessment is maybe like a good indication of whether the project is ready to commit some resources.
Yeah.
I think if we have a self-assessment available, I think a good next step could be doing the lightweight trend modeling.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure there is a process available. I mean, there is an assessment available at this point for either of these. But I see you have.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I think there is a self-assessment available for the Pixie one, because I know that Justin Kapos was looking at that and providing feedback with Raga probably about it.
Okay. Thanks for the update, Marco. Okay. But I see, Brandon, you have an feedback on assessment, so we can come to that after we just go through these things.
I'll put a comment on that issue to ping Justin, Raga, and Andy to see whether this would be a good opportunity to do the lightweight trend modeling.
Cool. Okay, sounds good. Next up, we have a bunch of translations for the CNCF white paper, and essentially we need volunteers. So if any of you want to volunteer for the Japanese version or the Chinese version, which I believe needs a review, that'll be great. Even the Spanish version, the PR is out. The Spanish one is currently a translation for V1, so we need volunteers for V2 as well. But if any of you can help in PR and in reviews for these translations, that would be awesome. The next one is so we are looking for somebody to act in a role as a community manager or a community representative. Essentially, at a high level, the role would be building interest within the community, holding meetups, writing blogs, whatever we can do to engage with the community and spread the word about cloud native security. So we're looking for somebody who can like help in that role. So if you think you're interested, reach out to the TLs or the chair, and we can talk about more about it. The last one was just a reminder. There's going to be a presentation on June 7th. We need to verify with Aradhana. Brandon, do you know if this is still on, the
Yeah, this
presentation?
is still on. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So there's a presentation on zero trust model for cloud native environments and multi-tenancy environments. So Zach from Tetrit is going to come and present on June 7th, which is next week, I guess, the week after that. And so, yeah, this just FYI about this one. Brandon, yeah, do you want to talk about your security evaluation?
Yeah. 1 second. Let me bring up the. Can
Do you
I
need to?
hijack? Yeah.
Yeah, hang on, let me stop.
Okay. Share screen. Where's this button? Wait. Okay. Okay. Found it. There we go. So can you see my screen? The other Visa window with
Yeah.
the document. Okay. Cool. So um, the TLDR of this document is basically, we've with the mission of kind of helping the TOC evaluate projects and also just in general to be able to increase the security posture of CNCF projects in general. We've done a couple of things, right? We've done self-assessment, security assessments. Initially, that's what we started with. We then changed that to joint review, putting a little bit more focus on kind of the project participation. And then we had an effort also called Security Pals, where it's like, okay, for projects that are new, they may want a little bit more guidance in terms of like what they can do, how they should get started with security. We always say, it's better if you start doing security earlier than later, and that's an effort for that. And then as well as kind of newer efforts such as the lightweight threat modeling, um, as well as the security resources. So we talk a little bit about a little bit of history on this, right? So I think there's been a couple motivations around security evaluations and assessments, and primarily, the reason tax was started was that, okay, TOC, the CNCF is getting more and more projects, and this number is growing a lot more day by day. And the effort around the tag, so like, okay, can the tag help provide additional kind of ability to evaluate projects within the different specialty areas? And so a lot of the security assessments initially and reviews were coming from the standpoint of the TOC needs to make a decision on something. We would like feedback from the tag on like what they think about this project. So that is one aspect of it. The other aspect of the what we talk about in this document is, I think there are a lot of practical aspects in terms of like tech security has to run the assessments. The obviously is the whole availability of both the projects of volunteers within the tag to kind of participate in assessment and make it successful, and talk a little bit about that. So one of the kind of key insights we gathered from this, right, is it used to be in the past where we had like basically there will be a project that coming in as incubation or graduation. um, there will be a bit of pressure from the project for the TOC to be like, oh, can we go forward this process? The TOC will ask tax security, can you do this assessment, this review? And it will go in the queue, and we will process the queue that way. What we realize is that, this so-called like forcing function for the TOC ended up in a few mismatches in resources, right? So we had projects that uh, were available sometimes and projects that weren't available sometimes. We had volunteers that wanted to work on specific assessments because it was something that they were using in their actual work, and it kind of was a good exercise for them to help understand the project. And also kind of like during the course of a length of a security assessment or security pal, we have the standard like open source problems of, someone something at work happens, personal issues, they have to step back away from open source for a period of time. And we found that like the length of security assessments usually dragged because of that, and most of them, well, not most of them, some of them ended up not being complete due to that. So we realized kind of like this push towards like having certain projects do assessments, even though they're not ready, or like kind of waiting for the stars to align, isn't necessarily like the best the best mode of operation. And so one thing that we are proposing in this is we say, okay, we should decouple the project maturity process from security evaluation efforts. And in one of the updates to kind of like TOC leadership, which I think Emily just sent out in the TOC mailing list, there is a kind of focus on helping projects, right? So I think that there is a push towards focusing on just tax helping projects directly. We want to do a little bit of decoupling from the TOC. Tax should be able to work autonomously towards the goal of making the projects better. I think that having the TOC as kind of an advisory role, but not necessarily like closely tying everything in. And so there are some mechanisms that the TOC is working on, such as what they call, and I think I noticed somewhere here, they call it tagging. So basically, every project that comes into the CNCF now as a sandbox process needs to be tagged with a tag specialization. So in this case, a project could be tagged as storage, it could be tagged as security, and that's kind of where the projects can get funneled to. So in this document, I'm not going to go into detail of every single thing, but we have the security self-assessment. This is what we started with. Basically, projects will provide a self-evaluation of what they think the security is, and I think in most companies this is kind of like the security questionnaire, right? This is the first thing that you submit when you want to release a product or project, and the security team just goes like, yeah, it looks good, or maybe this looks like it is touching some important things and therefore needs a closer look at security. And we have the tech security joint review, or previously called a security assessment, where self-assessments are targeted to be like 2-3 day efforts from the tech member, basically a week for the project to just fill out this questionnaire, and then someone for the tech would just say like, okay, clarifying questions, not questioning the validity of what's in the questionnaire, but to make sure that the questionnaire is kind of like filled up such that it can be consumed, there are no terms that are undefined, and so it should be readable and understandable. The security assessment is where like most of the heavy lifting happens, at least when we've done security reviews. And usually, we initially charted this as, okay, security assessments are like 2-3 week efforts, intense. You go in, you do it, you have some back and forth, you write a report after that, you deliver it. That's great. That was the original intent. Unfortunately, um, the issue with this is they tend to drag a lot longer. Part of this is like the number of parties involved. We usually have like 3 to 5 tech members involved, and then you have the project maintainers, which is like usually 1 to 3 of them. And what happens is that it gets difficult. A lot of the efforts around this are better performed synchronously, because it's a lot of back and forth question and answer, and this tends to drag on for instead of being 2 to 3 weeks, tends to drag on for like 2 to 3 months. And this is also because there are outcomes of this, and it's kind of like an audit where you have to agree upon like, oh, I accept the outcomes, contesting some of the things that the tech finds, and like understanding and untangling that those discussions will take time. Um, so this is something that we initially had a lot of we initially had some success with longer assessments. um, this has become less of a common occurrence, I think, one due um, to the projects. We had um, a big issue where we did a four mini project assessment with Argo, and I kind of talk about it here. That did not end up successfully because of that. So this is kind of like one of the impetuses we're talking about this. We had the security pals, which we have a tech member attached to a project. This was kind of more like low amount effort consultancy. The issue with this, it's tied to one person. And the other issue with this, it's there isn't kind of like a bounds on what needs to be done. I think John that's on the call was kind of the pioneers that did the pilot on the security pal. So um, if you wanna chime in anything on that, John, go ahead.
No, yeah, it's I think most of these things, I love the idea of them. I think that the biggest thing, and you were working on this, I don't know, a while ago, of like making sure there's no sort of cracks. So like if one of us disappears, like I did for a while, that like it doesn't leave someone hanging. But I think that the biggest thing around it was if there was some way to time box or sort of figure out maybe a menu of things which might be that those projects are looking for, like, hey, I'm looking for help with encryption or um, a code review or whatever else that could actually sort of help focus down and put a time around it.
Okay, another commander, so we keep track of that. Um, we had the lightweight threat modeling. This is something that actually is happening actively on the email call that happens every other week. So we've done this with, I think, 2 projects. One of it is the Flux multi-tenancy, and I can't remember what the other one is. But basically, the idea of this is it's difficult to get synchronous time. So we're gonna say let's sit down for like an hour or two, just talk through everything, have a more casual conversation, and then tag security members will ask the questions that are necessary in order to create a lightweight threat model, and be able to kind of deliver that. Part of this is that we found, when we were doing like self-assessments, we had a section on threat modeling, and I think that's what we found that projects mainly struggled with, where besides a few projects that kind of went through security audits and actually had needed to do threat modeling like Spiffy Spire, a lot of the projects, this was a new concept to them. And so this is one area that we found that it will be helpful to have some efforts that help guide the project along. So the time resource here, as you can see, it's like 1 to 4 hours, just preparation by maintainers, high level overview. We have like a doc review document, which is a template that we kind of fill in some details. And really the synchronous part of it is the workshops here. So like this would be like a call on the tag security. So for example, this meeting could act as a lightweight threat modeling session. And basically, by the end of the meeting, we should have enough information to generate a threat model. So it's up for flux, and I think there was one more recently, but I don't remember what it was. We can add that. And the last thing we have here is the education and materials, and this comes from an effort in contributor strategy, where they have this website that that does information about how they did, like, okay, governance. How do you set up governance for the project? How do you set up a GitHub project? How do you make it easy for open source contributors to contribute to your project? So this is something that we started on. There is a interesting thought here. We have a lot of resources in terms of text files and how-tos and things like that. We've gotten some feedback from discussions to the TOC as well that some of this could be interesting resources, as in like videos and like guided courses, like a Linux Foundation course, something like that, right? That's it. Like, how do you set up a open source project such that it's secure from the start, and like along the lines of like starting from your sandbox project, your incubation project, you have a graduation project, you're kind of focusing on very different aspects of security. So all in all, this document is kind of a place for discussion, and intentionally not proposing any solutions here yet. And so one of the things that we hope to get is some feedback on what we should do, other considerations we should think about. So a lot of the focus of this is, we want to be able to provide the security value. We want to make sure it's sustainable for tag security members, and as well as project maintainers. We want to make sure this is scalable with CNCF projects, which the number has grown a lot since we initially started security assessments, and also want to make sure we incorporate the feedback from other CNCF projects. Yeah, so talk for quite a bit. So any comments, questions on this?
So Brandon, is the idea like after we iterate on this to get feedback from the TOC, or have you already shared this with the TOC?
So we shared this document with the TOC. I think the general consensus is that they are agreed upon with at least with the previous TOC liaisons that we had. They agreed with kind of like this stick coupling of project maturity and things like that. I think the next step for us is to come out with a proposal and then get some feedback from them as well.
So by proposal, you mean which one of these things we are going to actually go forward with? That's what you mean? Okay.
Yeah. Like how we're going to be able to say, okay, what's going to be the new process for things doing a self-assessment versus like, what should do a security review? Maybe we are like, only if you're like going to if you're only a security critical project, you should do a security review. And other than that, maybe you can do like a self-assessment, and maybe if you're interfacing with a bunch of systems, you do a lightweight model. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And still, there's no like it's not necessary to do this for a project to graduate or incubate, right? Like, that's not a condition at all. Even now.
Yeah, that's not a condition at all. I think where we see is like TOC may look at a project and the level of questioning there will be like, is this a kind of like what we talk about. Is this a security focused project? Is this a critical project? Critical infrastructure? And if so, then like, you know, they better have in some form or another have good security posture, whether it is, you know, something that the project is done independently or whether it's something that they come to tech security for help. So you know, if the project has hired like a security audit company to do threat modeling and stuff like that, then you know it's great, right? It's
Yeah,
all
they don't
there.
need this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Is this open for comments, Brandon, or is it still? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I
Yeah.
think it should be. Yeah.
There is a link to that in the meeting notes as well if folks want to like chime in on this.
Yeah, I'm hoping to. I understand the kind of situation we are in with security assessments right now. So that's that's one of the kind of things that you know I'm hoping to help shape up a little bit more.
And then like the ones with the existing ones with Kubeflow and Pixie, are we still gonna go ahead with them, or that's gonna be like on hold till we get this thing resolved? I mean, we
Yeah,
figure out.
yeah, I think if there is like I don't want to say that we have to wait for this to get resolved. I think if there is like a push forward in terms of the self-assessment and assess security as reviewers, then you should go ahead. Uh, because I think that based on community feedback, we probably want this. I would say it's about a month out between RFCs and stuff before we can push this through. But if the project also is like, okay, yeah, we're okay, we're holding off like a couple weeks, and then you know becoming the pilot, so-called um, um, pilot project for this new effort, you know, that could be something as well.
Cool. Oh, speaking of which, we also need a security assessment facilitator, somebody who can manage security reviews. So if anybody's interested in that, that'll be awesome as well. Brandon, anything more to add? Any more comments on this, folks? Cool. So that the notes to the doc are in, sorry, the notes to the doc are in the meeting notes. So if you all want to chime in or add more comments, please do that. Anything else anybody wants to bring up? Any updates or any presentations they want to do in the future?
Yeah, I had a quick update. So regarding the top 10 risks project that we're working on, I think this was brought up in the tag, I want to say a month before KubeCon. And we've started working on it. TLDR is we're working on like the OWASP top 10 type of stuff for cloud native projects as well. Couple of focus areas right now are Istio top 10 risks and Kubernetes top 10 risks. And I think Aradhana had brought up some concern in the channel that I think she mentioned that we definitely wanted more efforts on Istio, and that is something that the group is looking forward to. She did bring up some concerns about Kubernetes top 10, whether that is of use or not. And we were discussing that, hey, we'll come up in the next meeting and have a discussion. I don't know if anyone else has context on what she mentioned. She mentioned like she got the feedback from the tag that Kubernetes top 10 might not be as relevant.
So Pratik, what these top 10s, are these blogs or what are these? What are you talking about here? Can you just give an explanation, like, because for those of us who don't know what's going on?
Sure. So I've linked the issue in the agenda. Let me paste it in the chat here as well. Basically, just like how OWASP has like top 10 risks. They typically do it for web applications plus a bunch of other things. We want to do it for cloud native projects. So it's basically coming up with the top 10 risks that one should take care of when they are deploying and managing a particular cloud native solution. So two projects in that are Istio top 10 risks and Kubernetes top 10 risks.
And this will be a white paper in the end, or will this be like a blog? What's the end?
Sorry, yeah, this will be like a white paper.
Okay. Awesome. So yeah,
the idea is to be ideally top 10 risk is something where you get a lot of feedback as well to see, hey, what are the most common risks. So this is supposed to be like a long-term project where we come up with various versions of top 10, like V1, maybe in a year we update it based on feedback. So it's supposed to be like a long-term continuous project.
And then we are starting with Istio and Kubernetes. That's the first thing we're going to look at.
Yes, in fact, so with Kubernetes, Jimmy Mesta is one of the authors, and Shlomo on the call is also a co-author for that project, and they authored it for OWASP. I think some of us are aware with certain issues with OWASP, and I think a bunch of folks from CNCF encouraged them to like port it over to CNCF. So with Kubernetes, kind of version 1 draft is available. We'll reiterate on it because it might be a year old, and just to see if it.
I think you're in mute, Patrick.
Nah, he's frozen. There he is. You're back.
Pratik, we couldn't hear the last sentence.
Oh, sorry. I just said I saw Brandon has a hand up, and I thought I should go ahead.
Yeah, Brandon, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I thought my audio was messed up as well. So I think I like this, and I like that how you're like collaborating with the other teams as well. And yeah, it's important for them to buy in for this, right? I know we want to make sure that we release something. This is something like Istio and Kubernetes community will say, yeah, we kind of back this up. I like to see, right now you have the current efforts. There are people working on it. I'd like to see that being, because like this is something, like you said, it's something that needs to carry on, needs to be updated. I'd like to see a little bit of proposal around, how this can be carried out. Like, I think there has to be some buy-in on like, okay, who owns this Kubernetes thing? Who's responsible for it? Requirement being someone from the tech, as well as someone from the community, right? So someone from Kubernetes, someone from Istio, and kind of like maybe like try and formalize this a little bit more, so that like if someone looks at this top 10 and is like, I don't quite agree with this, at least they know someone who they can talk to. And if someone, we realize that person is no longer contributing to the project, then we can at least like approach the community, find replacement. So like actually like just having a little bit of proposal around how we get the continuity going forward, I think will be helpful.
Yeah, that's a great call. We do need someone who's at least like responsible. If anything comes up to make changes. Yeah, that's a good idea. I will make sure that I reflect that in the comments on the issue, and for both of the projects we'll have respective responsible people assigned.
And then how do people get involved, Pratik? Like, is there like you guys meet every week, or there's a Slack? How do you guys get involved? How do you get people involved?
Yes, we do have a Slack channel. Cloud Tag Security Top 10.
Is it in the Slack? Sorry, is it in the issue or somewhere? Yeah, I think it's in the issue. Cool.
Yes, yeah. It's in the issue. There's a Zoom link, minutes of the meeting as well. And yeah, we are meeting bi-weekly right now, like Mondays, once in 2 weeks. I want to say around 1 p.m. Mountain Time. But yeah, like meetings are there, and we do have like some folks who've joined in the past few weeks.
Awesome.
So while we're here, and sorry, my camera's blurred and it's not purposeful, but oh well. So I've been participating on these calls. The one thing I'd love this group to discuss, and I'm not sure if it's part of what I want to bring up or not. Already right now in the world, we've got 20 to 30 top 10 security lists. Do we want to create, and we had this discussion in the call, but I'm looking for a wider audience. Do we want to create a top 10 list for each graduated CNCF project? Or do we want to create a top 10 list for cloud native? And the difference there is, if you look, so again, flogging the podcast, we did an episode on this a week or two ago, but if you look at the top 10 lists that are out there, they're almost copy paste of each other. So we know there's top level things like do encryption right, do logging right, filter your input and output, or encode your input and filter your output. There's very standard things we have in application security. So do we want to maybe say as a tag, these are the things we're concerned about for cloud native projects and overall, because there's orchestration, there's continuous delivery, there's microservices, there's serverless, there's some sort of common standard, common themes, and this is how we think they should be thought about from a security point of view. And then let each project sort of say, okay, based off that, this is how we interpret that. Or do we want to start juggling another 10 or 20 top 10 lists?
Frederick, you want to go ahead?
I think it's for everyone else besides, because him and I have had this conversation. I'm sorry. I'm looking for like either, your input, Ash, or anyone else's, like, or Brandon, or, anybody. Like it's for the overall group. That's what I'm.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm happy to wait. So.
Okay, so John, I actually listened to that podcast episode after you mentioned it a few weeks ago. I didn't know about your podcast. You mentioned it a few weeks ago. So I listened to it and I thought that was very interesting. I would say I was fairly convinced by your arguments, but then I was looking through, let's say, the API top 10, and it has some things that are not really the same as the regular top 10 web applications. And I do think that those are useful. For example, in a security champion training, where at a company where they're doing API stuff, they may want to show that list. That may be even more relevant. And let's say mobile, I think there are valuable differences between them. I do agree it's a lot and it's like hard to keep track of them all, but I do think that there is value in having them. On the other hand, there's got to be a limit. Like, I don't think that we should have one on every single project. I think web, API, you could sort of see how those are different, even though it's a type of web application, but okay. And then maybe there should be a cloud. My question is, should there be a separate cloud native one, or should Kubernetes just be part of a cloud native thing? That I think is a question. I don't think we need to. I don't think it's a good idea to have one for every single project. I do think there needs to be some balance, though. I don't think just one's enough.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, I think my thought on this is that I think traditionally top 10 lists have been very generic, and like looking at the OWASP, it's kind of almost synonym to like a Gartner report, right? To say like, this is kind of more at the executive level. Okay, what should your organization be looking at? I do think when you talk about top 10s at a project level, it's a little bit of a different audience, a little bit of a different intent, I feel. And that's maybe along the lines of like a list of prioritization of what are the kind of security gotchas if you're using a particular product. So in my mind, yeah, like a little bit of a different audience. And it's like, okay, if you're using Kubernetes, for example, there are some things that are inherently like just difficult to do in Kubernetes, right? Such as like RBAC or multi-tenancy, and I think like having this like maybe I don't think it has to be a top 10, right? This could be like 3 security gotchas. And I think if each project has, whether we call it security top 10 or not, like if each project has a list of like, here are where we find most people messing up their security, please pay extra attention to this. I think that would be helpful. The question of whether it should be maintained by this group, I think it's a different discussion. as a catalog maybe, but as a like creating the content with it, I'm not so sure because we may not be in the best position to do that.
Frederick?
So there's another possible approach as well that might be more informative, which is whenever you're looking at how an attack occurs, it's common to create a chain of events that led from initial discovery to final access and exfiltration of information or whatever the end result is. And normally it's not just one thing that fails, although sometimes it is, but usually there's a chain of events that have occurred by the defenders that have led to a system being vulnerable. And what may be interesting is instead of saying, here's like a generic, like fix your authentication, which is important, but but it's also very generic. And how do you do that in any given project? But perhaps if there's a path towards looking at certain case studies as to how certain attacks, very common attacks occur, we can produce that information as to how they end up occurring and showing how a given control can impact that attack chain and give them context as to why this particular control is. So it ends up being like maybe a little bit more control centric as opposed to like here are the top 10 things that you should do.
It reminds me a little bit of MITRE's attack framework.
Yeah, and that's a good example of one similar approach.
And I didn't mean to cut you off, Pratik, if you had something to say. Sorry.
Oh no, I said what I wanted to say. Thank you, though.
Yeah, I was earlier. I said I wanted everyone else to talk, not Pratik. I didn't mean it like to.
Not a problem.
Yeah, I mean we did have the conversation in the project call last time. Yeah, I felt like there is definitely a place for top 10. Felt like we definitely don't want to overdo it for like each and every project because pretty much all of them would be governed by the same set of security fundamentals and principles. So I would say we definitely want to limit what projects for what projects we come up with top 10 risks. At the same time, we want to ensure that the quality of content is really good in the sense it's not like just generic, hey, go to our back, figure out something. It has to be something more in depth as to provide like what exactly is the problem, how exactly should one deal with it. And of course, there are various strategies, but like what exactly is the problem with, say, our back in Kubernetes and how does one go about solving that? So yeah, that's my take that we should definitely limit. Definitely, we don't need like a top 10 for all the projects. For some projects, it might be useful, just like we said, like with web, it's different, with API, it's different. Similarly, with Kubernetes, certain aspects might be different.
And the other thing with top 10 of each project is you need to really know the project. So you cannot just come up with a top 10 for project if you don't know the project. So let's say you take project X and you say, okay, I looked at the GitHub page, I read the docs, and these are the top 10 things with the project. And you publish this list out, and the maintainers are like, what are you talking about? Like, so
yeah,
that's speaking as a maintainer of a project. So
yeah.
So that's sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying, yeah, like, we definitely want to ensure that like it with Istio as well, like, so this project is heavily being led by Jose, who was, I think, on the call a few minutes ago, but he's worked extensively with Istio. So like, he knows it's not just like someone reading off the documentation.
Exactly, yeah.
With Kubernetes as well, we have a number of people who've worked on Kubernetes and, they'll be the ones contributing to that. But yeah, that's a good call out. We definitely want to ensure that.
Go ahead, Marco.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think this top 10 initiative is very interesting initially, but I agree that there are issues either with maintaining a large number of top 10s or with having like a too general high-level cloud native top 10. Just thinking out loud, do you think that there might be a top 10 that we tie back to each individual category in the landscape? So not, let's say, top 10 for Istio, but in the CNCF landscape, there is like service mesh, right? Or API gateway or service proxy. Should the top 10 be tied to one individual category? So like one for, I don't know, I can't remember all of them, like, but I assume there will be one like for container registries. I don't know. We might assume there are similar concerns, similar risks for registries. And of course, there might be similar risks for service meshes. I don't know. So, or container runtimes, whatever. So is that another opportunity or possibility for keeping the number a bit shorter with the top 10s and not requiring going too deep on the individual knowledge for the individual tool, which might be hard to maintain if you don't have that knowledge, or you lose the guys in the tag security which know that tool very well, right?
Yeah, I feel like that's an interesting question, and I don't know if there's an easy answer in the sense. For certain projects, I think it makes sense to have like a broader category. But for certain technologies, like say the way Istio is done is way different than how Linkerd is done.
Yeah, that's correct.
And trying to have like a generic top 10 will end up with just like, hey, we are adding the same generic Kubernetes security principles, and it won't be catered enough. That's what I feel. And secondly, like in terms of like, if you just look from a high level, it might seem, hey, we don't want like 50 or 100 different top 10 lists, because as an audience, it might feel as very overwhelming. Like, hey, do I need to know all of them? But we also wanted to look at in terms of a user, and the top 10 risk is not something like someone needs to like remember or fully know about it. It's more as a reference guide. So if in my cloud environment, I'm just using Istio and maybe 4 or 5 other projects, then I probably just need to reference those projects, those top 10, make sure my environment is following the best practices and avoiding the risks mentioned there. Yeah, that's my take on it.
You're saying you don't have the OWASP top 10 like tattooed on the side of your arm? Yeah, I agree, right? I think the top 10 is kind of like a helpful exercise in prioritization. And like with comments and issues that we've seen open on the repo as well, being like, oh yeah, I looked at the white paper of what should I prioritize or what's important. Like the answer very often is it depends. And I think like there is a nice balance around there where like if you go a little bit too high up, then like the it depends becomes more and more, right? So gotta find the sweet spot there.
I mean, that was one of the things I was going to ask. Well, yeah, is how does a top 10 list or something like that? How does it live with in parallel to security paper, to the CN security doc? I'm just sort of skipping through it, thinking like there's not a list in there of like to do, but
I don't know if I got the question. Are you saying like where we would be hosting it, or like?
Oh no, I'm just saying. So we already have as a tag, we have the cloud native security white paper, right? So how does I would want to make sure that both docs are aware of each other. So it's not sort of we have like a the stag doc or the cloud native doc with all that stuff in the security doc, and then we have a top 10 list which is like is unaware sounding.
My take on it is that either the top 10 list has to be on the different granularity level, or if they're on the same level, then it's kind of a basically a prioritization guidance of practices within the white paper, which like I personally not sure whether that would be super helpful, because I feel like depends a lot on the stack you end up with. So I have reservations on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, while developing the top 10, I think we should definitely be aware and make sure it's in line with what the white paper suggests. At the same time, the top 10 risks, historically how they've been developed is it's based on the top 10 most common methods of exploitation. So it's not necessarily like, something always like very obvious, but it's supposed to be like, say if we're just talking about Kubernetes, then in the Kubernetes environment, like these top 10 types of attacks or methods of exploitation are what we see the most common. So there we just want to ensure that those specific 10 things are included. That might not seem like the most important security aspect, but it's like the most frequently exploited aspect of it. So like the white paper is definitely like humongous document with all the security best practices. The top 10 would just have like the top 10 commonly exploited stuff and how to mitigate that.
And so just a question about how we come up with this list. Are you going to actually try out these projects or like test these projects? How will you come up with this list? Or will this be like a collaboration from other material out there?
That's a great question. We were discussing this in the previous meetings.
Okay.
It's like, ideally, so I think one of the things which was brought up was, hey, if we can do like some kind of survey during KubeCon and get people to be interested to add feedback. I don't know if that worked out that well, but the idea is to like come up with a version 0.1 or like a draft version and release it saying, hey, this is like the draft version, let it stick for like 3-4 months. And we are looking for interesting or spicy feedback on it. And like, ideally I would want someone to say, hey, this is not really that that frequently exploited. In my experience, this should be replaced by this. So that way, like, if we get feedback from multiple users, whether it's by way of conversations at KubeCon or in a more formal way, if they're contributing to the paper directly, well and good, but I wouldn't say that's realistic always. But it's through these collective efforts of getting feedback from different places. So the idea would really be to ensure that this top 10 white paper is provided enough coverage, and like we are publicizing it in Twitter, LinkedIn, bunch of those places, so as to get more people to review it and provide feedback. So it would definitely be like an initial draft version, version 1, and as we get feedback, we iterate on it to make it better.
Cool. Shlomo?
Yeah, so I'll just say that the original last top 10, I believe, is based on real data. I don't recall where the data comes from, but that's documented on that project page. I originally asked Jimmy where he got the top 10 for Kubernetes, and he said something to do with something about conversations with vendors or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but it was something more informal. But the idea was that eventually it should become more robust and based on something more formal. Just filling in the context around what you were saying.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on the project? John, Pratik, anybody else? So yeah, the Slack is in the docs. There's an issue for it. So if y'all are interested to contribute, please join Pratik, John, and team with this project. Anything else before we close the call?
I think this is super cool. I think that there's potential in this. I think we having kind of like adding those partnerships and getting like the real life data, I think will be a big aspect of this. So.
And then once we have the paper, we can have the blog too on the website. So there's more content for the website too. Awesome. Great work. Have a great week and have a great day. See you all next week. Bye.